Sneakers and Cleats, the podcast. Welcome back to the Sneakers and Cleats podcast. It is Monday, September 11th. This is episode 23. As always, I'm Matt Roy, joined by Chuck McKinnick and Don Harris. Gentlemen, number 23 I think is pretty obvious.
I don't think there was a 23 before Michael Jordan. That was significant.
The number just didn't exist.
I mean, Ryan Sandberg is pretty significant.
Yeah.
To me it was, anyway, growing up.
You're a big baseball guy.
I knew Ryan Sandberg. I respected Ryan Sandberg, but I would have not known that he was number 23.
I put Ryan Sandberg down because I thought of him, but, I mean, you just think of Michael. Like, that the number just belongs to him.
Yeah.
Like, 24 is up for debate, but, I mean, 24, I think we'll probably all agree on Kobe. And now, even though now with Novak Djokovic, I think of 24. I think of 24 titles, but
for like 6 months, and that'll be 25.
yeah, I know he can just play forever. But LeBron 23 when his Cleveland years.
But I mean, everybody in LeBron's generation wore 23 because of Michael. They picked it because of Michael. Artie Griffin 23? Here in San Antonio. I mean, there's a lot of kids who just wore 23 because of Michael.
Marshawn Lynch is probably the most prominent football 23.
I don't think I would have known Marshawn Lynch was 23.
I thought he was 24.
I thought he was 23 with the Seahawks. Or 23 with the Bills. He was 23 with one of those teams. But anyway, Michael, pretty easy. Before we get started, just respect to all of the first responders. Today is 9/11, so huge first responder day, and obviously our hearts are with everybody in New York and who was affected by the tragedy 22 years ago. So start off on that note. But we got a big show today for what happened in New York in New Jersey in the Meadowlands last night with the Dallas Cowboys just completely dominating the New York Giants. We react to that. We maybe overreact to the Texas Longhorns, their dominant win over the Alabama Crimson Tide, and UTSA's win over Texas State, and maybe what our concern level is for Frank Harris and the Roadrunners after a good game, but a scary game if you're the quarterback. So let's start with the big thing. What a performance last night. Oh, my God.
Well, you're not kidding. I mean, I think, there was a sense, at least I think, several of us had the sense that just from what everybody was talking about during the offseason and throwing Super Bowl out there and what it takes to go about your business if you want to get that far into a season and, play for sports' biggest trophy. With Micah Parsons, there was a level of intensity, and I was thinking about this earlier today. I don't know how this guy seems like the most mild-mannered, good-natured, easygoing, easy to get along with, easy to talk to guy, and how there's this controlled rage on the field that how does he flip the switch to be that guy every single play, and then the second the whistle blows on a play or on a game, he's a totally different dude. I mean, it's like this duality that I can't comprehend. And obviously, because I can't comprehend it, I think that's probably, a reason why he's so great, right? There's some things that you can't really define or maybe have a grasp on how things are going with why this guy can play like he is, yet flip a switch. He can be buddies with guys across from him, across the line of scrimmage, off the field. But as soon as there's a game involved and it's called football, this guy turns into a possessed. It's not even possessed because it's his brain doing all this stuff. I mean, it's just something to wonder about.
Controlled aggression.
And we said last night, I mean, in the sports part, we were just kind of kicking it around. Is he the best player in the NFL, period?
If you're not named Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair question at this point.
The the replays of taking on double teams of 350-pounders and plowing through the two guys. It's just, I mean, he's not nearly as big as those guys, but he's that powerful.
Because he plays with leverage and pad level, and he just gets around all of them.
Okay, I'm going to be the wet blanket, okay?
Already?
Giants drive right down the field.
Yeah, they had a good I think it was a 7-play, 48-yard drive to start the game.
I'm going to contend that 40-0 dominant effort is a little misleading. Not a lot. It was a dominant performance by the Cowboys. Give them all the credit in the world. But I think the blocked field goal on special teams, and I think you can call it, I mean, it's a good play. It's an all-pro. Diggs hitting Saquon to cause the interception. It's a good play. He's an all-pro. But it's also one of those fluke kind of plays. Those two plays, I think the Giants shut down after that. Parsons was still dominant. They were still great. The Cowboys' offense was better than average by, they weren't great. They weren't shredding them. So I think it's not like 40-0 typically. I mean, they smacked them. I don't want to take away from them, but I think there were a couple plays early that completely took the will away from the Giants, and it wasn't necessarily the Cowboys that did it more than the circumstance.
Well, you can't have a 40-0 win without some luck. Like Trayvon Diggs, that was probably going to be ruled a fumble if that ball, or an interception, so it would have been an incomplete pass if that ball hit the ground. Just so happens that Deron Bland was there and caught it and ran it for a touchdown. Just so happens that Wanye Thomas blocks the kick and it goes right to someone else, and they're able to run it back. It's a great play.
Yeah.
So they made their own luck, kind of.
Yeah.
But you can't have a 40-0 win without the balls kind of bouncing your way on certain occasions. Like Stephon Gilmore's interception. Fantastic play. If that's 2 inches lower, that's not going to be an interception. They're not going to go in and
but
score
he made
again.
A great play.
But he made a great play.
But I think if those two plays happened in the third quarter, it might have been 21-all. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and then you have Graham Gano, who apparently forgot how to kick after he got paid, and he couldn't make the 35-yard or whatever it was later in the game either. Like, he missed 3 kicks all year last year, and he missed 2 yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, it was the conditions, though, too. I mean, it was a deluge.
Yeah.
You know, I look at it like this. You know, if you're the Giants offense, almost everybody scripts their first drive. You've been working on that drive for 6 months. So everybody should have a decent first drive that should at least, I would think, if you've done it right, you should go down and be able to at least get points. 3 points on your first drive of the season. I mean, you've been working on this all during training camp. This is the way it was going to be. To me, it was just, they got these guys down. Yeah, they got some breaks, but the Cowboys stepped on their throats. I mean, to come out and start the third quarter, go right down the field and score, I mean, that was another message of the Giants. You're in over your head. And just, you know, you talk about the weather conditions. I know I have, but the Giants look like they were 20 steps slower than the Cowboys in every single facet. I mean, they've got bigger problems if that's the best they're going to be, which obviously it won't be, and maybe it was just one night. But the Cowboys look superior in every single facet, and the speed is something that other teams are going to have to deal with on both sides of the ball.
My main takeaway was the defense. I don't know how you can come out of that.
We knew that in training camp.
But the thing is, they've been talking all summer, this can be a historically great defense. This can be one of the best defenses of all time. Our speed is unquestioned. We have depth at every position. They showed every single person that they can not only talk the talk, but they can walk the walk, because they had 7 sacks. Micah only had 1. Oza Odigizua had 2. Dorrance Armstrong had 2. And I think DeMarcus Lawrence had 1. I mean, they're so deep. Chauncey Golston had 1 as well. They're so deep everywhere, especially along the D line, that it makes their secondary look like world beaters.
And you got to give 2 or 3 of those to Micah.
Absolutely. He's getting doubled the entire time.
Yeah, and the fact that they got elite DBs that wrap up other receivers, cover them, blanket them. I mean, that leads to sacks too. But this was a deluge of force from the Cowboys defense too. I mean, it was not a fair fight. Had this been a boxing match, they would have stopped it in the third quarter. I mean, it was that overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
And why the Giants kept running Daniel Jones out there is absolutely beyond me.
I think they just didn't want to get shut out, because 40-0, that's the biggest shutout in Cowboy history. The last one was 38-0 and 78 against the Baltimore Colts. So I think they just wanted to get something going. They just wanted some semblance of like, okay, some positivity going into next week. But they, to the Cowboys' credit, they wouldn't allow that. They weren't going to allow that to happen.
Even with the backups in on defense towards the end of the game.
And since I was the wet blanket, I'll give you this little positivity. Last time the Cowboys won the Super Bowl, 95, opening game, Giants, Cowboys 35, Giants nothing.
That is now the second biggest shutout of the Giants they've ever had.
Third. Oh, Giants, yeah.
Yeah. And one other thing about the defense before we can get over to be a complete wet blankets on the offense. The depth on the defense was also kind of staggering. Like, do you guys know who Wanye Thomas was before yesterday?
Chuck and I, the first quarter, were saying, "Who's that?
Yeah, right.
Who's that?"
We had to figure out how to pronounce his name real quick before we went on.
Yeah, Bell. You can go right down the list.
Yeah,
right?
Marquise
There were
Bell.
Guys that, I would have thought. I think we all would have thought, right? You go to training camp, you go to OTAs, you go to mini camps. At some point, you would have heard a name or somebody talking about some of these guys. And it just goes to show you how much of a learning curve there is sometimes. I mean, yeah, it was very impressive that some of these guys that literally you had no idea who they were not only playing, but making plays.
Thomas made 2 or 3, not just the block kick.
Marquise Bell was converted from a safety to a linebacker like 2 weeks ago, and he led the team in tackles this week. Like, he had 8 tackles in the linebacker position that we were all worried about after Marvion Overshown got hurt. What does that say about the depth of this team?
And then they got Overshown.
And then they got Overshown that's going to come back next year. Like, the team's depth on defense is insane. And then they have who might be the best defensive player in the league. You think he's better than Aaron Donald, Micah, number 11?
I think now he will be. I think Donald, is his best years now. What's Aaron Donald, 32, 33 years old?
Something like that.
He had a big game yesterday, too. I mean, it doesn't
Gino-
show any
Did you
signs of
guys
slowing down.
Did you
Oh my
guys see that?
God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
did you see that?
Yes.
So funny. He just has a wide open run to the quarterback, and Gino's like, "Oh my god!" and throws it away.
Smart.
Hey, if he was running at me, I'd just run screaming too.
Yeah,
So I don't know.
strip sack, too. Yeah.
That was my favorite.
I think there's
thing
a good
yesterday.
chance at the end of 17 games that you might say that Micah Parsons is the best defensive player in the NFL.
I mean, and then you have T.J. Watt, who had 3 sacks yesterday, and I think he had 2 forced fumbles on Brock Purdy. So.
Maybe not right now. Maybe the crowning him is a little early, but I think by the end of this year or next, he will be the new Aaron Donald.
If you want to crown him, then crown their ass.
That's right.
They are who we thought they were. Let me look at my rundown real quick. I got lost in our conversation. Do you guys think that after last night, we've all been like, ugh, historically great? Ugh. Does this give you a little bit of pause, like this defense could maybe be the 2013 LOB or the 85 Bears or the 2000 Ravens?
It could be. I mean, based on what we saw last night. But again, it's such a long year. It's hard to make and reach these conclusions just after 1 week. But I think it is encouraging that they talked the talk all summer and they walked the walk last night. I mean, that was about as impressive a defensive performance as you will ever see at any level.
They think they are.
Was last night more bad Giants or good Cowboys?
I think it was good Cowboys.
Yeah, I do too.
I do too.
I mean, I'll say, I think the Giants, they had an easier schedule last year and they got to the playoffs. Good for them. But, sustaining what they did last year is going to be a little more difficult, obviously, because the schedule's a little more tougher. It's meant to be that way.
So last night, I almost think it's like it's hard to to kind of measure how the offense looked, because by the time they took the field, they were up 6-0, or they were up 6-0, and then they were up 14-0, and like, what do you do with that? Or it's 13-0, excuse me. So like, what do you do at that point? Like, you're already up.
I don't know that that's a factor, because I do think they've been waiting all summer to show what they can do. And I think Dak's the kind of leader, and that unit was one that wanted to be well put together and look good, So I don't know that played much of a factor into it at all.
We're talking about the offense?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, okay, you got McCarthy calling plays for the first time in a real game situation. And all that entails for the players that are trying to get a rhythm with all this too. They looked a little stiff, for lack of a better term. But again, it was raining. There were a lot of factors involved. We got to give the credit, pardon me, to the Giants defense on some regards. I mean, they were pretty good last year. So, was everything firing on all cylinders? No, absolutely not. But it was week 1, and, what they look like last night, you would hope won't be what they look like a month from now. So I think there are going to be some growing pains.
And maybe the score does take away a little sense of urgency.
Yeah. I mean, between the score and not really maybe having a sense of urgency, and then also they said that they went to their rain plan pretty early on in that game because it was a downpour. Like, you could see just how wet it was in the Meadowlands last night. Plus, that's not a great turf field anyway, from all accounts. So I don't know what I can take away from the offense. I can take away that they started using Kevontae Turpin in more unique ways and are trying to get him out in open space.
Yeah, that was a little bit of a surprise, right? You thought he would just be the, Inspector Gadget guy that would come in, but he got a lot of playing time.
No,
and a
he's
lot
a
of
focus.
touches.
Yeah,
he's a focus. They're kind of using him, it looked like, as like a Cordero Patterson almost. So you're putting him in the backfield and getting him out on tosses, or you're getting him on screens. You're just trying to get him in open field any way you can. So, I mean, he still had a couple. I think he had a drop or two last night as well, though. So, I mean, you still want him to catch the ball when he's out as a receiver. But they used him as a running back. He got his touchdown last night. He got in as a running back on a toss.
Yeah, on a physical play like 3rd and 2 or something like that, where I was surprised that they trusted him to get out to the outside and find a way to get in. But he's a special talent. He's one of those guys they got to figure out. I mean, he's Tyreek Hill-ish with his jitterbug quickness.
I think you also learned that Dak likes Ferguson. Dak likes Jake Ferguson a lot. I think on the first drive he had 4 targets. I mean, they were trying to force feed Jake Ferguson there at the beginning of the game. So
Dak likes his tight ends, that's for sure. It's been always a safety valve for him since he started his career.
Was there anything else that caught your guys' eye last night that we haven't talked about? I mean, just to go over some of the stats, the Giants had 16 net passing yards. In an NFL game. They had 16 net passing yards, 7 sacks. They averaged 3.9 yards per rush on 28 rushes, 108 yards. Cowboys had 122 yards rushing. Tony Pollard went for 14 carries, 70 yards, 2 touchdowns. How'd you guys think Tony Pollard looked?
Fine. Not great.
I mean, okay. But again, stiff. I think there just wasn't a lot of. It didn't look like everything was fluid. It did on that drive in the 3rd quarter where they were attacking, trying to get the ball downfield. But the thing that resonated with me more than anything, there was a point in that game where I was just watching Daniel Jones, and it was like he was dropping back not to pass. He was literally looking for where the pressure was coming from. And I don't know. He got roughed early on in that game, but I don't know if that just planted a seed on him that, look, dude, you're in for a long night. We're going to batter you. We're going to tatter you. We're going to tar and feather you. But he just looked like his head was on a swivel the entire night. And again, credit to the Cowboy defense because it was coming from everywhere.
Yeah, after those first 2 drives, Daniel Jones was basically just like, here we go.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what you do at that point. I mean, when the carnage is coming as swiftly and as furious as it was coming, it was really something to behold.
And I loved how the Cowboys, a couple of guys were offsides on purpose just to crush them at the end. Like you're up 40-0, and there was like 4 sacks in a row, and 2 of them were because guys just flew off the edge like a snap count early. And it's just like poor Daniel Jones getting crushed for no reason.
He's like, can you guys just stop, please? Like, this is just ridiculous. I just love the sense of urgency from all of them. Their next game is going to be a real test. We'll see the Jets tonight, but their next game, Jets at home, 3:25 Central Time. In Jerry World, so that'll be an entertaining one to say the least. Then you get put up against a real team. The Giants didn't look like one this week, so.
I know, Aaron Rodgers doesn't move as well as Daniel Jones.
Looking
to
see how the Jets do tonight too.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting game.
And then a short week for the New Yorkers, so advantage Cowboys.
I mean, I don't know. Aaron Rodgers never lost in Jerry World.
He never has.
Maybe
he never had to face this defense either.
That's true. David Chancellor and I will talk about that on Friday here on the podcast. So we'll get into a full preview of that on Friday.
What's that line going to be?
It depends on what happens tonight.
Yeah.
If the Jets come out and get embarrassed tonight, then I could see the Cowboys being 3.5, 4-point favorites. But if the Jets win tonight, I could see that being a 2.5, 1.5 for the Cowboys. Probably they'll have at least the 3 for home field advantage. It's going to be somewhere around 3. Whether it's 2.5 or 3.5, it depends on what happens tonight.
Interesting.
That's in my opinion. And then it'll probably be a low-scoring game, too. They'll probably put the line at like a 44, 43 for the over-under. That'd be my guess. But I'm going to be really interested to see how the Jets perform tonight in the Meadowlands. In the Meadowlands. Because they're home tonight, right? Against the Bills? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're home tonight. Back-to-back games in the Meadowlands for him. I remember Stephon and Trayvon's mom was like, I get the same seat twice.
Right.
So that was full. Another big win this week in college ball. Texas Longhorns came out and just destroyed Alabama. Like, maybe not destroyed. They handily won that game.
I agree.
This was the first double-digit loss in Tuscaloosa under a Nick Saban team in Alabama history. What does that say about the Longhorns?
I think it says a lot. I mean, I think I was surprised at their talent level at receiver, the size of these guys, tight ends, everybody, and their ability to create separation from Alabama DBs. I mean, that stood out to me. And it also struck me, too, that Alabama's quarterback looked a little bit deer in the headlights at times. I mean, there's no question about his athletic ability, his arm strength, all of those things. But there were times when the pocket was collapsing and he was running backwards, and it just wasn't a good look for, something you won't see from a veteran quarterback. But, the natural tendency is the pressure's coming at you that you retreat from the pressure, but you've got to step into the pressure. He'll learn that as he goes along, but I think the Longhorns were able to take advantage of that too. I don't know that the Texas defense played all that great, but they did create 2 huge turnovers in that game. And, again, just what they were able to do on offense. I thought when they really wanted to go and, go deep or attack, man, they looked awfully darn good. Better than advertised, and they were advertised as being pretty darn good.
Yeah, Quinn was one of the worst quarterbacks in, out of 134 last year. He was 128 in deep ball percentage, 22%, and of passes over 25 yards.
And he was bad against Rice, too, in that
He has decided to throw moon balls. And the touchdown to Worthy and the touchdown to A.D. Mitchell were both, I'm just going to put a lot of air under it and let him go get it. And those were 2 great decisions.
Worked out.
Yeah. Mitchell comes over from Georgia. He was one of their best receivers last year because Texas has crazy NIL money. Oh, Georgia does too. They just spend it other places. But Chuck's point is exactly right. The thing that stood out to me was Sark has changed the number of guys on the roster that are going to play in the NFL on Sundays. The true freshman, Anthony Hill Jr., number 0, the linebacker, beast. He was number 2 player in the country. Switched from A&M to Texas. He's on the field against Alabama. His first game as an 18-year-old, dominating. The tight end, NFL. The 2 receivers, Mitchell and Worthy, NFL. Ewers, NFL. And then their front 3, those guys were all 350 plus. They had the size. They have the athletes. Everybody's talking about moving to the SEC and well, guess what? This isn't the Texas that you've known over the last 3 or 4 years. Sark's been recruiting his tail off.
It looks like an SEC team.
Yeah, no sacks. I mean, Ewers had all day to throw. I mean, a lot of quarterbacks are going to complete passes, although, man, those were some pretty balls that he threw. And the fact that he completed so many passes that were, 15 yards or more. I mean, almost at least half, right?
Quinn looked great. The offensive line looked great. The offense in general looked really good. And to me, it was going to come down to how the offensive line protected Quinn and how Quinn could connect on the deep balls. And both of those, check. Both of those, you can check those off with a pen, not a pencil. But for me, the biggest thing is Texas. I think Texas proved that they're back now. Last year, they were 1 point away from beating Bama. And Bama was really good last year, as they are every year. This year, they came out in Tuscaloosa, won by double digits against a Bama team that we all think is pretty good. I think they just proved that they're national title contenders.
I think you're right. And I think
for
that
sure.
the AP voters agree with you, too, to be able to vault them into the top 4 now. I mean, there were some people that were picking them to go to the Final Four. I don't remember any of us doing that. Did you?
I think it was me.
Okay, nice work.
You did?
I just
in the playoff?
Well, you got FSU, and they're 3 now, so...
They're 3?
Yeah, FSU's 3 now. So Don and I look like geniuses right now.
Okay, well, I'll play catch up. We'll see how this all ends up going on. But yeah, just a mighty impressive performance. And again, to do that on the road in that place.
100,000 people in that stadium. 100,000 people, and you shut all of them up, except for Matthew McConaughey.
Who, by the way, how about Matthew McConaughey's weekend? He's on the sidelines with Del Conte at the Texas game, watching the game, sidelines in Alabama with the athletic director, and then goes in the locker room and he's hanging out with the players. And then the first person that Novak Djokovic hugs in his own family box after he wins his 24th Grand Slam is Matthew McConaughey, who I guess jumped on a private jet and got to New York, and then he's sitting in Joker's family box. That's a sports fans double dip weekend.
What a weekend. What a time to be alive. I mean, that's who I would like to hug as well. I mean, if he's in your box and I see my mom and I see Matthew McConaughey, I'd be like, all right, come here, Matt.
Well, it was kind of like he was just kind of the first one there.
I know, I'm just kidding. Last thing on Texas real quick. So they've faced a lot of grief for going to the SEC and for leaving the Big 12 and kind of separating themselves. Do you think that this win shows you that Texas has made the right decision, is going to be a force in the SEC, and has kind of turned the page into a new Texas era?
I don't think the competitiveness of it has anything to do with it. It's the right move because of the money. It's the right move because of the recruiting. I don't know that they're going to be a dominant force. SEC is very good. A lot of really good teams. But they're Texas, and they've got as much recruiting swag as anybody. And, for the money they're going to get going to the SEC, I think it was the right call.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, it's a no-brainer if you're Texas and Oklahoma to go do this. Will they be a force? That's kind of hard to answer, I think, at this point, because I think you can be a force like Ole Miss in that conference, but like not really be a force. Like Ole Miss is really good. And if you play them, you're going to know you've been in a fist fight. Same thing with South Carolina. I mean, all these schools that they've got good programs, but it's such a tough league to play in week and week out. I mean, if you don't have a roster that's super deep like Alabama, it's hard to show up at the end of the year, because if you don't have 3 deep at every single spot, which most of these schools don't, it's hard to compete week in and week out and be that team. So will Texas be that, iconic SEC marquee team? I don't know, but they could be awfully darn good, because I mean, as we saw the other day, who's going to want to play them, especially early on in the year when they're healthy?
They don't have a competitive game until October. They play Wyoming next week at home. Then they're at Baylor. They'll win both of those games. Then they're home to Kansas. They'll win that game. They play Oklahoma on the 7th, and then they have Houston, BYU, and then Kansas State. They might walk to November.
Well, Wyoming is unbeaten. And again, it's hard.
They beat Tech,
it's hard to project this out, because again, I still stand by what I said earlier, which is them defecting from the Big 12 is going to unleash a lot of neurons in other teams' brains to amp up their level of intensity, to let them know that it was a mistake for them to leave. And, again, it's going to cost you numbers in terms of, who's healthy and who's not. I just think there's a long way to go, but certainly Texas is off to a great start.
But I think
nobody would debate that.
I think they silenced us a little bit of that this week, though. I think by proving you can go into Tuscaloosa, face that environment under that head coach, with those players, they kind of proved that, fine, give us your best shot, I mean, and they're going to take it on the chin, and they're going to keep going forward. And they proved a lot to me on Saturday.
Yeah, they proved to me that they could be one of the 4 standing.
Well, I mean, they lost their quarterback last year, and they almost knocked off Alabama, and then they were just kind of, a good team, but not great last year.
Yeah, with Hudson Card at quarterback.
Look at Texas State, look at Colorado. It all goes back to athletes. Forget the brand and the shirts and skins and the uniform that you're wearing. If you flip and you get athletes that are going to play on Sundays, that's what Texas did. They're just like Colorado. These guys are going to play on Sundays. They got the hosses.
Well, a couple other guys that we hope play on Sundays, where there's some Roadrunners on that list as well. But Don, I want to talk about Frank first. Don, you said last night on Sports Sunday, and I agree with you. There was a moment on Saturday where we genuinely thought that we had seen the last of Frank Harris in a Roadrunner uniform.
There was a second.
Yeah, there was a moment when he got hurt, and then he went off.
The first time, he went off for 2 plays. He came back. Then that awkward throw, right? His first play back, he's down just writhing in pain. I was thinking, wow, what a valiant effort to come try to play one more time. Yeah. And then now it's over.
And it looked like his knee, the same knee.
I thought it was
the same knee that he's had 4 procedures on this offseason, the one with that had the patch on it. I was like, I honestly, I turned the game off after
I did too. I was so sickened,
Yeah,
we saw him walk off. He turned down the cart and walked into the locker room. And I was doing some other things. You know what I was doing? I was hooking up all my new YouTube TV. Anyway, I was doing other things, and I came back to the game in the second half because I had watched those 2 plays with Eddie Lee, and it was not good. And I came back, and he's playing in the second half.
Yeah.
And I was like, honey, Frank's back in. She was like, what?
Yeah. Did you think that as well? Like,
I was not watching the game. Sorry to say, I was watching it on my ticker.
Oh,
So, I just remember, was surprised UTSA going for it early on 4th down and getting it, and then Texas State kind of doing the same thing. I thought, oh man, this is really cool. I mean, 2 teams that are, just letting it go. They're not caring about really, the ramifications of a loss. We're playing to win. And, obviously I've seen the tape of Frank since, but I mean, I think it's a miracle every week that this guy is able to get out and go do what he does. And, hopefully he's able to go on Friday against Army.
I was extremely happy to see that he came back and played, but I also was like, I didn't want him to at that point. Like, it's at the point where when we're watching UTSA and I see Frank get hit, I'm just afraid that he's going to, like, almost like watching Tua, It's like you're just kind of afraid that he's going to not get back up.
After talking to him this offseason, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but it's been in my back of my mind from the very beginning, like, how long does he last this year? 4 knee procedures in the offseason. Like, how long does he last? And so I think every day with Frank Harris playing quarterback is a good day, a bonus.
Yeah, and it rings kind of in my mind. A couple of weeks ago, Jeff Traylor was like, one day he's not going to be our quarterback. And I think it's becoming painfully apparent that day is coming, like very, very soon. Whether it's at the end of this year, whether it's some point in this year, I think we can all say that we hope Frank is fully healthy all year and he lives a great life and he has a great senior season and all that stuff. But he's not going to be here forever, and I think all the UTSA fans have to kind of accept that.
And what a ride he's taken us all on. And I will say this: I fully expect him to play against Army. The way he addressed the media in the post game, I listened to his whole interview. It's his toe. It's not even his knee. It's his toe. He kind of laughed it off like, I wasn't going to sit out with a toe. Like, I didn't want to get made fun of. It's just a toe. He got a shot in the rear end, and he got a shot in the toe to deal with the pain. But it's nothing structural that will keep him out. It's just managing the pain. The bigger issue is he's not had any practice reps all season until last week before Texas State. So is this toe going to keep him out of having meaningful practice reps where he can continue to stay sharp so that we don't get back into where he was in the opener against Houston?
And then you got the Vols the following week. I don't know. I mean, at some point, do you realize, or does it make more sense to let him rest for a week? Would you rather have him for Tennessee
I think you could
than
probably
roll him out for Army? I think
probably
you could,
beat Army without him.
I agree. I agree.
I don't know. We'll see. You're not going to keep him off the field if he wants to play. Oh, by the way, Tennessee's 3:00 kick. Just announced.
All right. Besides the Frank stuff, it was a really gutty win by UTSA on a much better Texas State team. Like, Texas State showed that they're not Texas State of old. They're not going to be pushed around. My main takeaway though was UTSA's defense is
100%.
unbelievable.
100%.
Trey Moore is a man amongst boys.
What did we hear, Chuck, over the summer? Second rounder?
He had 3 sacks.
I mean,
by himself.
And you know what's coming, right? I mean, he talked about that before the opener, that he knows he's going to get doubled and chipped, and he just like, well, I know this is what's coming, but it's still incumbent upon me, a la Micah Parsons, to just go do what I do. And I mean, again, he's the guy that you have to stop.
Yeah,
you can't. He's just that much better than everybody else.
I won't say the team or the school, but it was a SEC NIL 350G offer this last offseason.
And he stayed here.
He stayed.
Yeah, the same kinds of schools that were shunning him during the recruiting process.
Yeah.
I mean, that's such a great story to me. I mean, nobody wanted him, was going to go to Army, decided that he wasn't the guy to go to a service academy, which, I mean, it's not me either. So
And
he
props
decided to stay here, and luckily a scholarship came open late for UTSA, but they were kind of on the fence about him. And now look what you got. I mean, breaks Davenport's tackle for loss record last year. I mean,
I was just about to say,
what a stud.
He's
What a great kid, too.
He's the best pass rusher since Marcus Davenport at this school.
And
Marcus Davenport went 14th overall, I think. So.
And props to Texas High School Coaches Association, because Larry Hill took Jeff Traylor to breakfast and convinced him, like, I know, Jeff's, well, he doesn't run this. I know, he's not big enough. I know. Take him and you will thank me later. Trust me. He's that guy.
Next time you see Jeff, ask him if he's taking Larry Hill to breakfast.
He's that guy. And you know what? Larry Hill was right. He's that guy.
Absolutely
yeah, I mean,
was.
and Larry Hill, I mean, he's got skins on the wall, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the guy that's coached multiple NFL players, including one that's playing linebacker right now for the Titans. So he knows what they look like.
Yeah.
Hey, props to Jamal Jeter
Yeah.
Jamal Jeter as well, Texas State running back, former Brennan Bear. So props to him for getting into the end zone. But the the UTSA defense, had 7 sacks. They only allowed 1.1 yards per rush.
Yeah, and that's a
Is
G.J.
that
Kinney
good?
offense. Yeah, that's
Is
really
that,
good.
Is that good?
And again, it's something that really stands out because of what Coach Kinney has done historically with offenses. I mean, if you score over 40 on Baylor, you would think you'd be able to at least, if we start the season, you'd be able to at least score 24 against UTSA, but didn't happen.
Well, the biggest stand of the entire game was after Cole Wilson caught that bomb from TJ Finley. They get stopped at like the 5-yard line.
Turf monster, man. It could be a totally different game.
Oh, absolutely. And force a field goal there instead of making it 20-17, it's 20-13, and it's a whole different game.
It's a turf monster and then a pre-snap penalty too.
Yep. I mean, but that made it a whole different ball game.
Totally.
Holding him to a field goal there just completely changed the entire outlook of the game.
If he keeps his feet there, Texas State might win that football.
Absolutely. But I mean, it was a gutty win from UTSA. I was impressed. I was also impressed. Let's just give it up to the UTSA fans as well. Almost 50,000 strong in the Alamo Dome. They had to keep opening up sections for people. I mean, there was someone on Twitter was like, "Oh, it's extremely quiet in here," and I was like, "Well, Frank Harris just got hurt, so why don't we just chill for a sec?" You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then there was talk at some point about removing Texas State from their schedule. So kudos to them for keeping them on because that obviously added to the crowd. San Marcos ain't that far away, and of course, there's quite a few alums that live here too.
And Chuck, to your Southwest Texas State Bobcats, I'm sorry. For me, they're always SWT. The uniforms are with major high praise for that color scheme. Those gold helmets with the burgundy or maroon or whatever, the way they do their color combination. There's a lot of teams that wear gold and some sort of maroon or red, USC's got bright yellow and burgundy, and Texas A&M does it with white. That combination there is kind of the 49ers, but with a different burgundy. First class.
It's also kind of a lighter gold too.
Yeah, it's good. It's Vegas gold.
Yeah, it's Vegas gold.
Yeah.
So last thing before we get out of here, what are your main takeaways through 2 weeks with UTSA?
Offense not sharp, defense great. Got to win the ones that you have to win, like Army. Offense hasn't shown me that they can compete with Tennessee, but I think what we've seen from the defense is they'll be able to compete for a conference championship.
I think it's just a matter of getting sharper as the season goes along, right? I mean, they've proven they can run the ball. They've got elite receivers and getting healthier at the moment, or by the moment at that spot. Can Frank stay upright? God bless him, man. He's a warrior, showing everybody how to do this, right? Playing when you're not 100%. He does it better than anybody.
And the loss of Mekhi Hart is big.
Absolutely.
He goes down at right tackle again. Went down the first game of the year last year. Had ACL surgery.
Feel horrible for him.
He's married. Got 2 kids. Already has his degree. Was on the NFL scouts' radar before the first knee injury. This one's career-ending. It looks like. Jeff said 8 weeks, but let's see.
Yeah, I mean, I feel horrible for him because it was like right back to back, him and Frank. Like in that second quarter, it was Frank and then him, or him and then Frank. I don't remember what the order, but
he was in a lot of pain.
But yeah, I was like, this game's going off until the second half. I turned that off immediately. I did not want to see any more. This is carnage. My main takeaway is UTSA's defense has done what UTSA's offense has done the last 2 years, and is carrying this team until the other side of the ball can kind of live up to their mettle.
JT's coming back this week, I think.
It's going to be fun. So I think that's all we got for you today on the Sneakers and Cleats podcast. We have had a heck of a weekend, guys. I'm not going to mention Texas A&M because, why do we need to talk about that? Miami got the best of them.
We sure did.
Is there any sort of a hot seat for Jimbo?
Why would
I don't know.
Back to $85 million.
Game.
Why don't we ask the boosters if they want to pay $85 million?
I don't know.
Their offense still looked good. Their defense looked like
they're
crap.
A little anxious. They're a little anxious there in Aggie land.
Yeah. Wednesday, we're going to be bringing back the High School Hype Squad, previewing Bernie Champion and the New Braunfels Canyon. Our guy Zach Hedrick will be joining me for that one. Give Chuck and Don the day off for that as we head into week 4 of the high school football season. Remember, you can get this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple and Spotify. And, I think you can get YouTube TV. You can watch it on YouTube now, Don. So you're all hooked up.
I am not popular with Mrs. Harris right now.
Why?
User application.
Oh, okay.
Education.
We'll get Michael Seifert needs to come over to your guys' house and give you a run through of everything.
It's
trial and error.
Change
baby.
is hard.
It's a new remote. We don't know where all the buttons are yet.
That's right. I want to go back to the way it was.
And we gotta give props to Chuck, who beat the crap out of me in fantasy this week. And
what's that?
Even a blind squirrel.
Chuck's team
every now and
Chuck's
then,
team scored
Matthew.
160 points thanks to Dallas's defense last night, so that's good. Churchill and Madison coming down to the wire today. That one had to be delayed, so we'll get a fight song next week from you guys. So that's good. Please download, rate, review, subscribe, give us some feedback. We will be back on Wednesday, me and Zach Hedrick right here on the Sneakers and Cleats podcast.